Chapter 3: The Great Transportation Game. One of the biggest investments a country makes is in its transport infrastructure. Around $12 billion a year is spent in Australia on road and rail projects alone. Prior to the 1990s, government departments and public bodies, including public construction companies, built most of the nation's transport infrastructure. Their projections of how many people would use the roads and rail lines that they built were on average accurate. Often the infrastructure was paid from public funds, but sometimes governments would charge tolls for roads and bridges under a user pays philosophy simply because it was an easy source of taxation. Using tolls to raise funds for the authorities is common historically, from the Romans to medieval British kingdoms and colonial Australia, with Parramatta Road being the first toll road, opening in 1811. Before the 1990s, there were no major problems with the road and rail sector in Australia. In that period, James and his mates were more active when it came to airlines and ports. James eventually figured out that there was an opportunity to play the game in transport because at the end of the day, nearly all infrastructure decisions are made by politicians who have discretion about which projects get built, who gets large construction contracts, and under what conditions those contracts are written. If only James and his mates could use that discretionary power to their advantage, they could cash in at the expense of Sam. Because transport investments had been made so successfully by government departments and public agencies for decades, James needed a myth that could provide cover from public scrutiny as he sought out his mates to learn how, together, they could get a cut of this sector of the economy. His goal was clear: to own roads and other infrastructure that would be worth a lot more than it cost him to build, preferably paid for by government as well. We have extensively analysed the largest 38 road and rail infrastructure projects since 1992 in Australia, including high-profile projects like the Sydney Harbour Tunnel and the major toll roads in Melbourne, and can tell you how James and his mates did it. Our research assistant, Kathy Ahern, has pored over the documents, analysis and reviews, helping to tease out the main elements of how James succeeded in turning a simple idea into a lucrative game of mates. The myth that worked so well for James in this sector, and in many others, was that the government budget is like that of a household and that governments must live within their means by cutting back spending, no longer borrowing to pay for new road and rail construction. The story was that government debts would have to be paid by future generations and future Sams. I hope you've enjoyed this sample from the audiobook Rigged. To hear the full book, please subscribe to Fresh Economic Thinking.